This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. And now I ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Sullivan.
Here.
Trustee Barrow.
Here.
Trustee Dodd.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Kurzman.
Here.
Trustee Kennedy.
Here.
Trustee Plunkett.
Here.
President Belinsky.
Here. We're all here, so we obviously have a quorum. Getting a little bit of feedback. If everyone would mute if you're not talking, that would be great. Actually, I'll mute everyone.
Happy birthday, Eric.
Okay, that's better. So this meeting is being conducted remotely via the Microsoft Teams software. I'll now ask Peter Skiles, our Director of Administrative Services, to explain some of the logistics to the members of the public joining us tonight. Peter, I've muted you, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, President Belinsky. Okay, so everyone joined the meeting tonight muted. And when President Belinsky calls for public comments, those joining us with the Teams client can toggle their mute status by waking up your screen and tapping the microphone on the toolbar. It's the meeting toolbar down towards the bottom of the meeting window. And if you join by audio conference, you can toggle your mute status by pressing *6 on your phone. That toggles it both on and off. And only attendees can unmute themselves. No one is able to unmute another attendee. And just a reminder that public comment can also be provided by emailing the village or through our YouTube live stream, which President Belinsky will mention shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skiles. For those of you watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under a gubernatorial disaster proclamation, which was issued by Governor Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, our in-person village governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the state recently amended the Open Meetings Act to permit electronic meetings of governmental bodies during a gubernatorial disaster proclamation. So we are conducting our business tonight in compliance with these new provisions of state law. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live on our local access cable channel 6 and on the internet at youtube.com/user/villageofwilmette/live. I'll read the URL one more time. www.youtube.com/user/villageofwilmette/live. Recording of the meeting will be archived on the village's YouTube website, as we do with all other televised public meetings. Now, a remote meeting obviously requires a different mechanic for public participation, and Mr. Skiles gave you a preview. I'll give you some more logistics. To ensure that our residents and business owners and other interested parties have had the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment prior to the start of the meeting via email. So if you send an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com prior to the start of the meeting, our staff will read the email during either the public comment portion or the relevant agenda item during this meeting. Now, if members of the public who are participating, who are watching the broadcast would like to participate during the designated public comment periods, you may submit comments through the YouTube live chat feature, and a member of the village staff will read your comments to the village board. Also, for those of you who have connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or via the telephone at the appropriate time, I will ask people to speak up if they'd like to make a public comment. Because of the logistical difficulties of not being together in person, I will first just ask people to identify themselves as someone who would like to address the board, and I will assemble a list, and then I will call on individuals person by person for their turn to speak. For people speaking during public comment, they will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board, just as they are during an in-person meeting. All comments from the public, regardless of how they are received, will be recorded in the meeting's minutes, as we typically do. And again, I'm going to mute everyone here, just so we're all muted to start the meeting, but be sure to unmute yourself if you're ready when you're ready to speak. Before each meeting, the board receives a packet of agenda materials, and these materials are also posted on wilmette.com on the Friday before our meeting, so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the board members receive. This week's packet contained 361 pages. So I'll move on to item 2, which is public comment. At an in-person meeting during public comment, individuals are allotted up to 3 minutes to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda. However, as I said earlier, this meeting is being conducted remotely, so I will now ask people who are watching on YouTube Live to submit comments for the village staff to read. You can find the chat window to the right of the YouTube Live video window. And while they're typing, I will ask whether any public comments were submitted in advance of the meeting. Let me note that there were some comments that were received that were related to item 6.61 on the Judiciary Committee report. That item is off of consent, and we will not read those comments now during public comment, but rather read the comments relating to item 6.61. That's the resolution regarding the advisory question on recreational cannabis. We'll save those public comments until that point in time. So I'll now ask Mr. Artiega if there were any other public comments submitted in advance of the meeting.
We have received additional comments.
Okay, fire away.
Sounds good. Okay, the first public comment is from Jolanta Wilhelm. I am writing this message in response to the decision of closing the Elmwood Dunes Preserve Beach from the public. This decision is very unfair and inconsiderate of the residents of surrounding villages because it denies access to Lake Michigan. The decision to fence off all entrances to the lakefront have nothing to do with serving the community. We do have a right to be able to access the lake, just like any other place like forest preserves, parks, etc. The actions of a few do not dictate and do not account for the actions of the many. Please consider the community and its desire to access the lakefront through Elmwood Dunes Preserve Beach. The preserve should not be closed. If the pandemic was the primary concern and reason for closing the beach, the state of Illinois is already in phase 4. There is a relaxed amount of people allowed in public spaces, especially so when outside. Natural distance is already kept on beaches regardless, personal space to lay down, and copious intermingling would not be a cause for concern. Closing down a public beach during a hot summer during these times takes away the one refuge and place for spending time in the sun, essential to one's well-being. If need be, a monitor can always be assigned to regulate the flow of visitors to the beach as done previously. If money is a concern, there could be even a small entrance fee, i.e. approximately $1 to $2, to help maintain cleanliness and safety precautions on the beach. Additionally, littering should not be part of the cause for closing the beach. Every public place, unfortunately, deals with littering. Please keep access to the lakefront through Elmwood Dunes Preserve Beach open. Thank you for your consideration, Jolanta Wilhelm. Okay, moving on to the next comment. This is from Joyce Knopf. I support approval of the active transportation plan and encourage the board and staff to actively implement the recommendations therein so that bicycling and walking will be better and safer throughout the village. Joyce Knopf, 510B Ridge Road, Wilmette. Moving on to the next. This is from Suzanne Pesta. I support approval of the active transportation plan and encourage the board and staff to actively implement the recommendations therein so that bicycling and walking will be better and safer throughout the village. And we have, I believe, one more public comment, not in regards to cannabis. And this is from Lee Paget. I support approval of the active transportation plan and encourage the board and staff to actively implement the recommendations therein so that bicycling and walking will be better and safer throughout the village. And I believe those were all of the public comments that were emailed to us that's not regarding cannabis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Artiega. So are there any individuals who have connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or via the telephone who would like to address the board now? I would ask them to identify themselves and please remember to unmute your line and give me your name and I will create a list. Okay, moving on. Was there any, were there any comments submitted via the YouTube live chat box?
No, there were no comments submitted.
Okay, so we'll close public comment and move on to item 3, which is the consent agenda. As described on the agenda, items which are routine business that are not normally debated by the village board are placed on the consent agenda. And tonight, those items are items 3.1 through 3.10. So all of the items with a 3 are on the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight. If an item is not removed by a member of the audience and it is not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and it will not be discussed. So I'm going to go through the public comment sort of process to see if there are any items that any of the members of the audience would like to remove from consent agenda. So if you're watching on YouTube Live, you should now make that request. And did the staff receive any such requests in advance of the meeting?
We did not, no.
Okay, and are there any individuals who have connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or via the telephone who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If so, please identify yourself now, and remember that you do have to take yourself off of mute to do that. Okay, did anyone submit a request via YouTube Live?
No requests were submitted on YouTube.
Okay, so are there any items that any of the trustees would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, I'm seeing some no nods. All right, so may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
I believe that was Trustee Barrow. Is there a second?
Second.
That was Trustee Sullivan. It's been moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Trustee Sullivan,
Aye.
Trustee Barrow,
Aye.
Trustee Dodd,
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman,
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy,
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett,
Aye.
President Belinsky.
Aye, so the motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. For those of you who are watching on TV or who dialed into the meeting that have an item on the consent agenda, it was just approved. There'll be no further discussion of that item, and that includes land use items 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6. I have to tell you, it feels sort of good rattling those land use cases off again, as we had quite a gap in time there where there were none. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the report of officers, and we'll begin with a report from our village manager, Mr. Brayman.
No report, Mr. President.
Next report is from our corporation counsel, Mr. Stein.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
And then we'll move on to item 5, which is the report of the Liquor Control Commissioner. And there is no report tonight, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the standing committee reports. Item 6.1 is the Land Use Committee. Trustee Barrow.
All items are on the consent agenda.
Next up is the Finance Committee. Trustee Kennedy.
We have a report, a 2020 financial status update, so I believe I will cede the floor to Mr. Halgren.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation. All right, is it available for everybody to view?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so just one update on the presentation. We did have the addition of one additional slide in regards to information about what the revenue losses projections were going to be in the fourth quarter, but we will get to that. It's a slide 5. So this is
Eric, Peter Barrow here. May I interrupt? Am I the only one that isn't seeing the presentation?
I can see it.
I can see it.
I can see it.
See it.
That's not good.
Peter, it's page 287 of the PDF.
I'll get to it a different way. Go ahead. Thank you.
all right. So providing an update. This is the update for our financial analysis. It is a period 6 update, so we have completed our financial analysis, or we have closed through June. This is the July model, so it's updating our projections for the remaining 6 months of the year. So the first one I wanted to go through was the revenue assumptions. Nothing's changed in terms of how our original projections were developed. But what I wanted to focus on here is that the 2 scenarios that we've laid out lay a potential path towards our economic recovery. However, in neither scenario do we expect a full economic recovery. We still estimate that there will be revenue loss through the remainder of the year, and this will likely move into 2021. One of the later slides shows what those revenue loss projections are in the fourth quarter and then what they are through the entirety of 2020. The other factor that we have not included in the model is a potential resurgence of COVID-19 and the reestablishment of business restrictions by the state. If there is a resurgence or additional restrictions, staff will update the revenue assumptions, but at this point in time, we have not, none of those have been implemented. So looking forward, the July model has used our revenue performance through the first 6 months of the year to update our revenue assumptions going forward. So in the past month of June, revenues were 14.5% below budget. The biggest areas of underperformance were the most economically sensitive revenues that included sales tax, real estate transfer tax, and permits. However, on the positive side, the June actuals performed slightly better than both scenario predictions, $50,000 above scenario 1 and $70,000 above scenario 2. So based upon this performance, staff has a higher level of confidence in our future projections for the remainder of the year. Ultimately, we were fairly close to what our expectations were for the month of June, so we think that we've gotten close on how COVID has impacted our different revenue sources.
Yeah, so that's actually a bit of good news. I mean, I believe last month we pushed some of our projections down more, and this month, you know, these are projections, so we know they'll be wrong. We just don't know by how much or in which direction. But it seems like, you know, our goal of sort of creating some scenarios to track, you know, at least for June, we were close, and we were close to the good. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that is a fair statement, and I think the next slide kind of gets to that. In the month of April, we performed a little bit better than expected, and so we adjusted May projections up from their original. Well, May was not a good month, so we had overcorrected, and so I feel like we kind of righted the ship in the month of June, and we've aligned both of those scenarios to appropriately kind of match what is going to happen for village revenues. So
just for clarification, the scenario 1 and the scenario 2 shown for each month was basically where the scenario stood before we got the results.
That is correct.
Right, and now our future scenario 1 and 2 incorporate actuals as far as we have actuals, and then the projection just for the rest of the year.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah. So during the first 3 months in which we developed the forecast, our revenues performance is reasonably aligned with our overall forecast. Actual revenues have performed 2% better than scenario 1 and 4% better than scenario 2. However, this certainly doesn't mean that we're on track to meet our budget goals. We continue to be down compared to budget through 6 months, but ultimately what this just means is that we are closely aligned to our predictions and feel confident that the remainder of the year will align with our future estimates. So because of our revenue performance compared to budget and to our scenarios, staff is going to continue to maintain a fairly conservative approach to our revenue projections for the remainder of the year. So what this table is showing is our expected revenue reductions in the fourth quarter and for the entirety of 2020. And this is in scenario 2. We have an equivalent chart for scenario 1, but we wanted to focus on scenario 2, which was really the worst case scenario. So as an example, we are still predicting a 40% decrease in home rule sales tax during the fourth quarter and a 28% decrease in home rule sales tax throughout the whole year. So in this scenario and in scenario 1, we are not predicting a full recovery. We are just predicting an economy that is slightly better than quarter 3, which we felt was going to have a significant impact from the COVID-19 business restrictions. So in the financial model for July, we made several minor adjustments. We increased vehicle licenses backed up based upon a significant increase during the month of June, as that delay as the delay that we had provided for residents to pay those vehicle stickers started to come up. More people started to pay, and we had a significant increase in the month of June. And then we made adjustments to both the hotel tax and the fuel tax based upon continued underperformance in both of those revenue spaces. But for the remainder of our major revenue sources, income tax, permits, property taxes, etc., they aligned with our forecasts. And so we didn't make any significant updates to those revenue predictions. So we felt that this approach was financially prudent and would provide conservative estimates for our year-end figures.
And Eric, from the detail in the memo, my recollection is that a number of these were actually part of the overperformance, but that in the interest of staying conservative, we didn't forecast a continued overperformance, no matter how small. We just kept it the same.
That's correct.
Right.
So, for instance, income tax performed slightly better than what our original model had. However, we didn't want to make any upward movement in those future projections until we saw continued performance that would indicate a trend in that area.
Eric, Trustee Sullivan, just one quick question. It sort of piggybacks on President Belinsky's comment about the land use, but when it comes to permits, are we current on our permit activity, or is there a backlog still from being shut down?
I do not have any specific information regarding that. I could follow up with community development, or if somebody's here that can offer some additional information on that.
Is Mr. Adler on the line? I see his name.
Yes, we are current on the issuance of permits.
Okay. And John, are we seeing any? I mean, are you seeing any? And I was trying to put this to the manager notes, but are we seeing more demand, or do you think projects are being put on hold?
We've actually seen a number of new homes come in the last probably 30 to 45 days.
Okay.
So there definitely are still new homes coming in and additions being done. I can't say, I wouldn't say that it's pre-pandemic, but again, I think there have been, in the last 30 days, I believe 3 new homes that have come in, and I'm pretty sure these are homes that are spec homes.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Sorry, Eric.
Oh, no problem. So the next chart shows how our overall model has changed since its inception in the month of April. So total revenue figures have varied slightly in each scenario, with scenario 1 just above $31 million in annual revenues, and scenario 2 slightly below that $31 million mark. But they've really kind of set that low end for our total revenues. And additionally, both scenarios saw a positive increase in the July model based upon positive revenue results in the month of May that President Belinsky had just mentioned. So scenario 1 went up to, by about $160,000, and scenario 2 went up by $220,000. So realizing that both the orange and the gray lines will never realign themselves with the original budget line, the blue line across the top, our hope is that the economy continues to recover and both those lines continue to tick up over the next 6 months, as opposed to going down. So year-to-date revenues are down 5.1% compared to the overall budget. And while we've had positive performance in the month of June and started to see positive signs in several of our economically sensitive revenues from July figures, we're still expecting annual revenues to be down in the range of 8 to 9.6% for 2020. So staff will continue to be conservative in our estimates and only make significant changes to our model when there are clear economic trends that start to appear. So you can see again from this chart that during the green bars indicating our actuals during the first 6 months, and then both the yellow and the red bars are showing what our expectations are compared to budget for both of those scenarios.
Oh, and Eric, what happens in October?
So October is the shift out of, because the county allowed for the delay of property tax payments, they shifted that from an August payment deadline to an October payment deadline. We shifted a component of the revenues from August out to September. So that's why you see a much more significant drop-off in August compared to some of the other months, and that shifts out to October. So the next part is moving into the expense side. So our expense model is based upon a 3-year spending trend and specific capital project cash flows to help predict our spending through 2020. There's been several updates to the expense model for the July model based upon our expense performance, and the factoring in of around $1.3 million in savings. In the month of June, expenses were about 19% below budget. The biggest areas of underspend were associated with capital projects and purchases. So this includes timing of expenses for the road program, the purchase of new vehicles. So essentially what happened is we expected to spend those dollars in the first half of the year, and we haven't at this point in time. But what I really want to make clear here is that these aren't counted as savings, as we have updated the model to shift these expenses to later periods. So therefore, the year-end expenses will still include the cost of the road program and the vehicle purchases, and that our year-end estimate is a true estimation of where we think we will end the year. So the $1.3 million in savings are made up of 6 major categories. So one of the larger ones is we're projecting a 2% savings in personnel that's associated with regular wages and benefits. This is in part to holding vacant positions open and reduced overtime hours. The second one is a reduction in operating expenditures that includes street lighting, tree planting, vehicle costs such as fuel and maintenance costs, as well as training. We have another $150,000 in savings for the engineering program due to bid savings. Additionally, we've deferred a variety of projects and purchases, including the sidewalk snowplow purchase, the council AV equipment, and the comprehensive plan till a later year. And then we've reduced the hotel tax rebate based upon the hotel tax receipts. So in addition to these savings, we did have the addition of one major expense, $531,000 for the economic grant program, of which we have expended just over half of those funds to date. So combining our year-to-date expense performance with our expected savings, staff is estimating that the final year-end expenditure figure will be around $34.8 million, which is just about a 2% overall reduction in our expense budget. So we will continue to monitor the budget for additional cost-saving opportunities, and as those come up, we'll present those to the board. But again, similar to the revenue chart, what you see here is our projected, our budget through the first 6 months and the actuals, and then our projections for the remaining 6 months of the year. So the overall effect of both of these revenue and expense projections is illustrated by the impact on year-end reserve projections. Our original budget reserve at the end of 2020 in the general fund was expected to be around $13.6 million, approximately a 38% reserve level. Due to the expense and revenue reductions, our ending reserve balance is reduced by around $2.5 million, which brings our reserve levels just around 31%. So while this impact has been significant, the reserves are doing what they were intended to do, provide relief when there are serious financial pressures outside the control of the village. So you see, we've gone down, but we are still in a very positive financial position with still maintaining over 30% reserve levels. So in addition to reviewing reserves, staff also evaluates the overall cash position amongst the 3 major funds, our general fund, water, and the sewer fund, to validate the availability of funds. At the end of June, the village had $15.6 million in cash for operations. And then at the beginning of July, the village was in receipt of our $23 million bond issuance, which solidifies the village's cash position moving into this year and into next.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, we probably don't need to track cash anymore. I think the only concern we had with cash was timing of the bond issue and timing of the expenditures on the neighborhood storage project, because the project started earlier than expected, given the school. So I don't know if there's value in continuing to sort of apprise the board of cash. That's not normally something that we have a concern about. It was just the particular circumstances.
Yep, understood.
Clarify though, the board doesn't need to track the cash, but staff is still going to.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
for
staff will
presentation.
Just want to make sure when you say we're not going to track cash, who's we?
Yeah.
So moving forward, we'll continue to update the board on both revenue and expense projections. Additionally, the village's budget process is currently underway. Capital project review is ongoing, and staff is developing operating budget requests. Over the next 2 months, staff will be providing a mid-year financial update and presenting the capital program. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hallgren?
Actually, this is Trustee Dodd. I have a question for Mr. Hallgren. Do you mind going back to the slide that had revenue outcomes for the general fund? Yeah, that one right there. Thank you.
Okay.
So can you, I just want to make sure I understand. So in November and December, I'm showing, it looks like under both scenarios, like it's hard to tell exactly, but it's looking like the actuals are relatively close to the budget. I just want to make sure I'm looking at that. And that seems surprising to me relative to some of the other months. I know the other months where it's higher, it's because of the influx of the income tax. I'm just trying to understand that.
So I think if we're looking, you're talking about the actuals, or you want to know about the
looking at
scenarios?
November, December, the bar chart, and I'm noticing that it looks, in the other months you can really see a little bit of a difference between actual and budget or whatever, but in these 2 months, it appears to be somewhat close. And I'm asking if that's accurate, and that's how I'm interpreting it, and if you could clarify that.
Yeah, so I can provide you the specific, I don't have the specific numbers in front of me right now, but I think we're looking at around a 300 of, probably anywhere from a $250,000 to a $350,000 decrease in each one of those periods. So I think it's still looking like about a 10 to 15% decline in revenues during both of those months. So we have started to see improvements our expectation is that we'll see improvements in those months, so they aren't as stark as maybe some of the earlier months. But
yeah,
we
Mr.
are.
Hallgren, can I interrupt? Didn't you have a slide that showed what the actual assumptions were for the fourth quarter? The revenue assumptions?
That slide. I think he added that slide.
Yeah. This right there. So this is what's driving what Trustee Dodd is asking about, right?
Correct. So in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the fourth quarter, we are expecting a 22.5% reduction in revenues for income tax, 40% reduction in home rule sales tax. So for home rule sales tax, if we were looking at quarter 3, we were expecting probably, I think, a 50% reduction. So this is a slight improvement, but by no means is it a full recovery of the economy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, look, we're going to keep tracking this. I really like this monthly meeting cadence because it provides the board with the most current information we have. And, we had good news last month, but if we have bad news next month, we'll adjust the projections appropriately. Staff will adjust those projections. And right now, our best guess is that our reserves can pretty well handle what we expect to have happen, but all of this, all of it can change. So I think the monthly sort of review is really good to keep us as up to date as we can be, and know where we're tracking. And just, I'm again pleased that we had a decent month last month, so that's good.
So I think one other question I had. Sorry.
No, please go ahead, Trustee Dodd.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's really, with what President Belinsky said, which it's really nice that we kind of had a good month last month, and so it gives us more confidence in these numbers. This is more, I guess, a question to some other board members, but at the time that we put these two scenarios together, I believe we kind of felt like scenario 2 was kind of our worst case scenario, and, but that was, scenario 1 was 1, and I'm just wondering if we still believe that scenario 2 is, given what we know today, we know a lot more than when this was put together in April. Do we still believe that scenario 2 is our worst case scenario, or should we, or should we looking at revising that scenario at all so that, maybe it addresses, what if there is another shutdown in the state or whatever, in the fourth quarter? I'm just asking the question how other trustees might feel about that.
Well, let me instead of answering the question, let me ask the question. What was our projection for the sales tax numbers in going back further? So how much different is this projection than what we're experiencing today? In other words, how much improvement is there?
Give me a minute and I'll be able to find that information.
Eric, I think that's the most economically sensitive number here is the sales tax number.
Eric, if you need to stop sharing your screen, go ahead if you have to pull something else up.
No, I have it up on one of my other screens. So if I were looking at sales tax information in our original, so just to give you some numbers here, our original budget was overall for sales tax is about $5.4 million. When we originally developed our first scenario, one was coming in at $4.6 million, and right now our most recent update is at $4.6 million as well. So we continue to track in line with what our expected downturn was. Does that answer the question?
Well, I guess my question is, in the situation where in our scenario 2, we said that the revenues start to come back in quarter 4. So what was our assumption in Q3 for the sales tax? I thought you had said earlier it was down 50%.
Okay, so if we're looking at home rule sales tax in Q3, we expect a 50% decrease in home rule sales tax. And then in Q4, we expect a 40% reduction in sales or home rule sales tax. So we're seeing about a 10% improvement from quarter 3 to quarter 4.
And and right now, at least our June numbers, we were, I don't remember, where sales tax was ahead or behind. Sales tax was ahead as well, wasn't it, versus what we had projected?
Yeah, so even looking a little bit forward, if we look to the July figures that we've received from the state, we are tracking slightly ahead of both of our scenarios. We are 40% down from 2019. So looking at those two figures, so essentially we're at 40% is what we're experiencing, and we're expecting a 50%.
Right, so we're if stated another way, and I know things can change, our current tracking on sales tax is actually consistent with down 40 versus down 50, even though right now we're still projecting down 50.
That is correct.
Okay.
So I have a question as well, and I'll be challenged to ask it clearly, but I will try. And it's not unlike Trustee Dodd's line of questioning, and that is, how soon is too soon to think through and apply some of this modeling to the potential of another shutdown? And I know that your plate is full, and I know that 2020 has plenty of unknowns as well, but it feels like perhaps our timetable for thinking about 2021, might need to be different. And I'm just kind of curious for any thoughts about, to the extent to which you can apply some of these models a little more forward thinking, not because I want to, but just it may require that extra elbow grease should we have another shutdown.
So in regards to 2021, we've begun our discussions on what the revenue potential reductions in the revenues are going to be, but we continue to wait for probably another 2 months of data before we have a full understanding of what a potential impact of the shutdown is. As far as creating a third scenario in regards to a potential re-shutdown, I think that might be a little bit premature at this point in time, just based upon the metrics that we continue to get from the county regarding how our COVID cases are. But we would adjust scenario 2 down further just to further reflect that bottom side risk for our revenues.
Yeah, and I think part of this is a decision-making tool. This is to provide information to us to make decisions. And, we've sort of made our calls on this year's capital budget. Next year's capital budget is certainly going to be a more challenging experience than this year's, just given that we haven't had to really deal with a reduction in revenue that from sort of outside impact as opposed to decisions made by the board. And there are other major capital projects that we're going to talk about tonight, but that we're not making decisions on. So our next set of decisions are in September. So we'll have the August financial report at that point in time, and that'll provide us some additional information. And the September decision is really just the question on whether to move ahead with Hibbert Park, the second phase, right, Mr. Brayman?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's the one decision that we could be more informed more informed on, and then we're entering into the budget process where, again, capital typically is the place where you look first. So I'm comfortable, at least Trustee Dodd, that with what we have right now for at least another month or so, as data comes in and we can decide what to do with scenario 2 and scenario 1, whether we want to move them.
And I'll just jump in and add that we're at our only meeting in August, which is the fourth Tuesday of the month. We'll be rolling in our mid-year financial review into that discussion. So I think it would be fairly easy for us to show what another shutdown could do, because all we're doing is taking what happened in March, April, and May on real estate transfer tax and permits, and then combining that with what we're seeing now with sales tax and income tax, given the timing of the remittances. So I think it's fairly easy for us to model what could happen, and we can provide that comfort level to the board. We're not going to track our performance to that, but I think it would give a good big picture of where things could go if we went off in that direction again. That's
a good idea. Trustee Dodd, is that helpful, sort of next meeting, that information?
Yes.
Trustee Kurzman, helpful for that kind of information?
Very helpful. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Hallgren?
Not a question, but more, this is really good work. Eric and Mike and Melinda and everybody, I think, the fact that we're reviewing financials 3 weeks after month end is a significant step forward. So, and I echo what President Belinsky said. It helps make decisions, and I think it'll help us going into the back half of this year as well as into 2021. So I would just ask, and I know you will, but keep the diligence up on this. It's very good. The memo was very well done as well in the packet.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Sullivan. We appreciate it.
If there are no more questions, that's all that's on the Finance Committee report. Thank you very much, Mr. Hallgren and village staff.
Thank you, Trustee Kennedy. We'll move on to the Administration Committee, which is Trustee Dodd.
All items were covered on consent.
Municipal Services Committee is Trustee Sullivan.
We have one item this evening. It's item 6.41, which is an update on Phase 1A, 1, and 2 of the Neighborhood Storage Project. And I was advised that I'm supposed to turn this over to Mr. Brayman first, who would like to kick it off.
Thank you, Trustee Sullivan, and I'll buy Bridget some time to share her screen. And I'm going to steal her thunder a little bit, but she's going to talk about it. But the Phase 1 Community Playfield Project has really been a grand slam. We're ahead of schedule. We're under budget. Our communications have been outstanding, and we retained our AAA bond rating and had an outstanding interest rate. And it's really credit to the team that's been put in place to manage this. So Bridget and Dan Manus, Cliff Remler, Melinda Malloy and Lynn Drog, and our village staff have just been phenomenal, and our consultants too. Darren Olson, Matt Moffitt, Lisa Brock, and Bob Matea. This is an incredibly complex project with so many moving pieces, and to be where we are today is just really, really outstanding. And it gives me a lot of confidence as we move forward with phases 2 and 3, as well as Central Avenue, that we've really got the best possible team in place to manage these complicated projects. So kudos to the team for that. Transitioning into part of our discussion that Bridget's going to walk us through, this is going to be our first real dive into phase 2 at Hibbert Park. And as we've done with a lot of our larger, more substantive issues lately, we're going to have multiple discussions leading up to a decision point. So this is just the first discussion on this topic. When we meet again in August for our mid-year financial review, we'll be providing the board with an updated stormwater utility fee projection for the 2021 fiscal year. And then when we meet in September to make our decision on whether to proceed with Hibbert Park, we'll come to you with what we hope is a near final construction number as we're working with Berger Excavating on a possible agreement to do that work as well. So, we'd like to have the board with as much financial information as we can provide when it comes time to making that decision in September. And we'll have presentations on the project again in September as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget.
Good evening, everybody. Can everybody see the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I can at least.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So we'll jump right in. Thank you, Village Manager Brayman. The purpose is just to give a quick update on the 3 active phases of the neighborhood storage project. And by all measure, we're off to a really great start. So I'm happy to be here. This is a map that we're all very familiar with. When we're completed, we will be protecting 98% of homes vulnerable to flooding in a 10-year storm in the west of Ridge Road area. So here's an overview of the entire project once it's all built out. And please stop me at any time if you have any questions. The first phase, phase 1A, you may recall, is about a little over a mile worth of new storm sewers, all of which are in the village right-of-way. We started this project last fall, and we're about 95% complete. You'll notice a lot of activity right now on Lake Avenue near Skokie. The last step in this process is water main replacement on Lake between Skokie and Hibbert. So that project is well underway, and we expect an early September completion. I'm happy to say that at this stage in construction, we are trending about $260,000 under the awarded contract value of $4.5 million. And I feel like it was just a few short meetings ago that we were talking about neighborhood storage phase 1 and whether or not we should proceed with the project. And as we sit here today, there's been a tremendous amount of work being done. So just a quick overview, this was the 6.6 million gallon underground storage reservoir at Community Playfield, and again, over a mile of new storm sewer to feed water into and out of the Community Playfield site. All of the storm trap vault work is complete, and the contractor is working on park restoration. All of the work in the meadow easement is complete, and we are working on restoring the school's parking lot. We're on track to have that completed by August 15th, which is the critical date outlined in the intergovernmental agreement with the school district. As far as the storm sewer work, all the storm sewer work is in. In fact, final surface went on those streets now, so it's really just putting the final touches on landscape restoration. I'm happy to say that because of the early start we had with the schools being closed early, Birchwood access is not required. So we are able to complete the project through what's called a late access stage, which is just moving minor equipment in and out of the site outside of school hours. The contractual completion date is November 28th. We should be completed well ahead of that, well ahead of schedule. So we definitely we're probably looking at a September, October completion. So again, more good news, construction is trending a couple $100,000 under the awarded amount for neighborhood storage phase 1 as well. Some phase 1 highlights. I think our successful execution of the work is related to just constant communication, weekly meetings with the contractor, more frequently as required. We had weekly meetings with the school district staff as well as the park district staff to ensure there was seamless coordination throughout the project. We had a fantastic stakeholder coordinator, Lisa Brock, who was really out in the community making sure all the residents' needs were addressed. And weekly construction updates were provided in e-news. We did our best to keep the residents informed of activities, and as well as 24/7 access to our project camera. There was only one contractual scope change, and it wasn't unanticipated. It was anticipated in the IGA that the village would install or pay for irrigation at Community Playfield. So the Park District worked with their engineer, Gawalt Hamilton, to prepare a design, and we received bids from Berger to go ahead and install that this fall as a change order to the contract. So that's a change order that the village board will see in the near future.
Bridget, hi, this is Santa. Can I just ask a quick question in terms of the stakeholder and the work that was done? Were you able to, how many days a week was this project done? I know there was a big, we were going to go push 7 days a week at the start, and I just kind of wanted to find out, what the schedule ended up being in the height of construction.
Sure, thank you, Trustee Plunkett. The contractor did not have to work any Sundays, but they did work most Saturdays. And they asked for an hour earlier start on Saturdays, so we did give them approval to start at 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m.
Thanks.
And Bridget, this is Kathy. So I think it's awesome that the stakeholder has done such amazing communication with the residents and things like that. So, what kind of feedback, of any, have we heard from the residents regarding this project, and what maybe learnings would we use then to apply to the Phase 2 project?
Sure, thank you, Trustee Dodd. There's really one thing I think that stood out for us, and that is the dust that was created from the truck traffic. On the peak days, we were running in excess of 200 trucks a day into and out of the site. And there was one day early on in the project when it was about 90 degrees and windy, and we weren't prepared for it. So we immediately worked with Berger, who every single day since that particular day, they've had watering trucks up and down every truck route into and out of the site, through the parking lot, as well as on the park site itself. So that was a bit of a learning curve, and it's something that we'll take with us through the next 2 phases, is to just make sure we stay on that dust control.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on to Phase 2. This is a quick snapshot of the Phase 2 map that shows the big red box is Hibbard Park, and then you can see the storm sewers. If you can see my hand here, we have a new storm sewer on Hill Street coming out to the west. We've got storm sewer coming down the east side of Hibbard Park, new storm sewer down Glenview Road all the way down to Frontage Road. There's a new storm sewer down Valley View, and then the optimized sewers on Ramona and Beverly. So this underground storage reservoir is about half the size of Community Playfield. It's 3.3 million gallons of storage, about the same number of linear footage of new storm sewers. And in the IGA, the Park District and the Village Board agreed to additional drainage improvements within the park, negotiated as part of that agreement. So just some park highlights. Where Hibbard Park is different than Community Playfield. Community Playfield was a very large footprint, 100% gravity vault. This vault has a much smaller footprint and a deeper, taller tank. So this one's about twice as tall as the Community Playfield tank at 15 feet. And similar to Community Playfield, however, is it takes a lot of truck traffic to build it. So we're expecting about 270 storm trucks coming into the site, and 4,000 dirt and stone trucks, either moving excavated material out of the site and bringing stone trucks in. So the function of the vault is it'll start to take on water after about 1.5 inches of rain, and that's measured over a 3-hour period.
Bridget, can I interrupt you one quick
Sure.
question? So for access to the site, has there been any conversation when you look at the site? I'm looking at it on my iPad. I mean, obviously it's right along Skokie Boulevard. Is that the anticipated route for most of the truck traffic as opposed to going down Hill Lane, or I guess it would either be Skokie or Hill Lane?
Yeah, so President Belinsky, if I'll get through this slide and show you on the site plan where that access road is going to be.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, super. This is, again, just a quick highlight, and I'll get into it in greater detail in the next slide, but because this is not a gravity tank, it does require a pump station with a control panel that will be at grade, as well as a backup generator at grade. So there are, again, unlike Community Playfield, there are some structures at grade here. The pumps, however, will be below ground, and they will be inaudible. And the generator will create 65 decibels measured at 23 feet, which is equivalent of business office noise. So it's not a very loud activity when Nabil's water management department has to come in and exercise that generator about once a month. And all of these parts, the pump station and the generator, will be connected to the village's SCADA system. And so, President Belinsky, let me... Here we go. So just a quick orientation of the site here. If you look to the far left side of the screen, this is Glenview Road. So you can see the entrance to the rec center and the rec center building right here. Along the bottom edge of the page is Skokie Boulevard. On the right side is Wilmette Avenue. And Hibbard Road is up at the top of the page. You don't quite see it. And then Hill Street comes in right into the tank, which is where our primary ingress and egress pipe will be for the vault. A couple of other things I'd just like to point out. You can see this light shaded outline here. This is the building envelope that the Park District's architect said they wanted to maintain free of any structures or any storm management activities. So this part right here is not, while it might be impacted by construction, it's going to be completely restored. So there are no permanent structures in this area. And then the dark shaded area represents the area that we intend to impact as part of our project, either through new storm sewers or the tank itself. So everything in the shaded area will be impacted by construction and restored. So getting in a little bit deeper, if you follow my hand, this is the actual shape of the tank itself. And it's really dictated by all these trees along the perimeter of the park. So it's got a little bit of an unusual shape. All these trees will be protected during construction. The trees along Skokie Boulevard will be protected during construction, and the tank itself will kind of fit right in between. You may recall during the early stages of the concept development, there were 8 trees that were identified internal to the site to be removed, and those 8 trees are still scheduled to be removed.
It's Dan. Can you re-explain that, what you said when you said the Park District wants that building site?
Sure.
And because I see some of the gray overlaps that. What did I miss when you said that?
Sure, thank you. So this is part of their long-term concept. If they were to ever expand the rec center, this is the area that they wanted free from any permanent structure. So while we may need this area for regrading, it's not, the tank and any of our storm sewer work is not in this building envelope at all.
Got it. So why do we have it grade, just in case? Primarily for drainage and grading. The contractor needs room for staging and being able to store materials and moving around. So it's just all part of the work zone. I got it. Okay. Understand.
President Belinsky, I haven't forgot about your question. It's coming up on my list here. As far as sewers coming into the tank itself, we've got a big sewer coming down Hill Street, and then another one coming off of Glenview Road right through this area right here. So we'll talk about this sewer when we look at cost increases, because you can see we're running through some trees, and there's an implication to save those trees. So as far as access, this was one of the things we talked about very early on because it's certainly a concerning, it's impactful to the residents on where we decide to bring these trucks in. So we looked at all options. We looked at bringing trucks in and out of Glenview Road through the Park District side, through the rec center. We looked at bringing them this way. We talked to IDOT about coming in off of Skokie Boulevard. We looked at Hill Street. There's already a lot of work happening on Hill Street, so that was detrimental as well. But what we ultimately settled on is on Wilmette Avenue, there's a piece of land that the Park District owns that has right-of-way access to Wilmette. So this is a really nice opportunity for trucks to come in and off of Skokie and then right into the site. The only downside to this access point is there is a residence here that we would protect through some screening, visual, and as well as some landscaping. And it's also a bit narrow. So at Community Playfield, we were fortunate enough to have a two-way ingress and egress through the High Crest School parking lot. Here, this is narrow, so there is really only one truck coming in and out at a time. And that does impact production, which has a cost implication as well. Are there any questions on the site plan? Oh, I forgot one important thing. The pump station and the generator are going to be located right in this area right here. This is beneficial for several reasons. Primarily, though, when Public Works and Water Management comes in to check the pumps and check the generator, there's nice, easy access off of Hill Street and a small asphalt pad that those pieces of equipment will sit on. So it's very easy to access versus something that would be internal to the site, and then we'd have to pave a road to get there. There's also, you can see this is all Park District land here, so the generator will be tucked in this area, and everything will be very heavily landscaped and screened from the residents.
Bridget, this is Kathy. So can you, on this diagram, what are the trees that are getting removed?
Kathy, if you, Trustee Dodd, if you see, do you see my hand?
Yeah.
They're all right in this area right here. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Those circles that you've got, that like, those, yeah. What are those?
Those are existing trees that we're going to protect and save. Same with these trees.
Okay. And so is there going to be a turnaround for the trucks that are coming in, or are the trucks going to come in and then have to back out?
No, they'll be able to turn around in the site and then pull out.
Okay. Because otherwise, sometimes backing out of trucks can be really loud because...
Yeah,
well... it can be loud too, obviously, but...
Sure. That's not to say they won't ever back up in the site. They may certainly have to do that, but no, they will not be backing out. So the next slide, what we're going to do is take this exhibit and basically flip it on its side. So if you can picture drawing a straight line from Hibbard all the way down into the tank, we're going to look at the profile of how this system works. So on the far left side of the screen is Hibbard Road, and the tank is on the right side of the screen. So all the local storm sewers on Hibbard Road and the trunk sewer on Wilmette Avenue, when it rains and those sewers start to fill up, you can see this is the water line right here in the Hill Street sewer. So Hibbard starts to fill up, and this big sewer on Hill Street starts to fill up. And when it reaches a certain elevation and overtops a weir, so this will be a control structure inside a manhole on Hill Street, then the water will go into the tank and start filling up the tank. So this critical elevation means before streets start to flood, the water is going to start entering the tank. So the tank will fill as long as it's raining. As soon as it stops raining and we know that the sewers downstream are starting to drain, then the water will start flowing out of the tank into the pump station and through a small force main and get that water out back into the system, where it ultimately will go to the Lake Avenue pump station. The village board may recall a couple board meetings ago, some residents on Phelan Court expressed concern about the rear yard drainage on their street, and the staff has been aware of this for years. The Phase 2 project, from a street perspective, the street flooding is going to be significantly reduced as a result of our project. And while we cannot go into the backyards and install new sewers, what we're doing is we're providing infrastructure for those residents. If they were to get together and run a pipe through the backyards, we'll have the ability for them to tie into the village's system. There'll be both capacity in our system as well as an inlet that's at an elevation that they'd be able to tie in. Currently, there's a sidewalk. The Glenview Road sidewalk is higher than those backyards. So basically, they're sitting in a bowl and they're not able to drain those backyards. The Phase 2 budget, this is really still conceptual, and this is intended to show really the progression of the cost estimate from very early stages in February of last year as we started ticking through the steps of the design. So you can see that we've had some fluctuation. We started out at 14.2 million, then we dropped to 13.2 million. This drop in construction cost is really attributed to the decision to make this a pumped tank instead of a gravity tank. The smaller footprint tank is actually cheaper than the large gravity tank, so that's where the savings came in. And then as Christopher Berg started to go through the 30% design and getting more information, we had some adjustments in our construction costs, optimization, sewer costs, so we saw a little bit of increase there. And I apologize in advance for the confusion. This last piece is not exactly an apples to apples comparison because the storm trap was included in this number and then we broke it out over here. So we have the most information in this July 65% estimate. We've got our construction costs, we've got optimization, storm trap. Now that we have a design, we're able to put a number to the storm trap, and then we also know what the Park District set aside is in the intergovernmental agreement. So we're at about 15.3 million. So what I wanted to do is just briefly run through some of the larger cost increases in Phase 2. The top half of this slide are definitely things that we would recommend. There's some more discretionary items down at the bottom, and I'll quickly go through them, but please, if you have any questions. Yes.
Yeah, just to clarify, we're not making any decisions tonight. This is just first step in information for us, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And Bridget, when do we have to start ordering the storm traps?
If we look at the schedule and we want to build this tank starting in January of next year, we'd like to build it January, February, March. In order to meet that schedule, we'd have to have a contract with Storm Trap in September.
Okay.
The first line is just an inflation adjustment. We talked about the construction access being a single point of access, so there is cost implication there. The back on the site plan, I mentioned that there's a storm sewer that's coming in from Glenview Road, and in order to save the trees in this corridor, we're recommending that we directional bore that piece of storm sewer, and that's about a $275,000 add to save those trees that border Skokie Boulevard. Just a design change on how we protect the village's brick storm sewers by building kind of a bigger concrete chamber instead of a traditional manhole. That added a little bit of cost. The water main on Hill Street is undersized and in conflict with several of the storm sewer pieces, so we're recommending that that be replaced at the same time. The traffic signal at Glenview and Hibbard Road, where we will be working, does not have adequate pedestrian signals, so we took this as an opportunity to add it to the project. We fully intend to approach the Cook County, who owns the intersection, to ask for reimbursement for this cost should the village board choose to move forward with it. This cost also includes upgrading the crossings with ADA accessible measures.
And Bridget, sorry, this is Kathy, not to get into the detail here, but just this particular item, isn't there work being done Oh, this is it. Isn't there work being? This is Glenview and Hibbard. Okay, I'm thinking of the wrong street.
I had the same thought, Trustee Dodd. I had the same thought. I'm like, wait, didn't we just do Hibbard?
Yeah.
No problem. So Park District drainage improvements, the set aside for that is $75,000 in the IGA. The $251,000 for soil amendment, this is a Park District request to basically import an engineered topsoil that promotes maximum growth. There is a savings because originally we thought we were going to sod both Community Playfield and Hibbard Park. We're not going to sod it, so there's a savings. We're going to seed it, but as part of the concession to seed, the soil amendment is a bit more expensive. On Valley View, if anybody's driven, I know Trustee Kurzman knows Valley View well, there's a center island that may be there for aesthetics, but we think it's a really good opportunity to take that island and depress it and make it into a stormwater feature with some rain garden plants in it. So that is in addition to the project. And the village owns a small pocket park, if you will, at the southeast corner of Hibbard and Glenview roads. It's a small depressional area. It's quite an eyesore currently, and it's the next step in our, along the same lines as the Eden's Pollinator Garden that we're building currently at Lake and Laramie. And again, since we're working right at Hibbard and Glenview Road, we thought it would be a good opportunity to build that rain garden with this project. And then finally, the limits of resurfacing are on Millbrook, Valley View, and Kilpatrick are actually much larger than where we're putting storm sewer in. The road needs resurfacing, so this is a cost that we would allocate back to the road program. But again, it's a good opportunity to do more work along with this project.
Hi, Bridget. I have a question too about some of these allocations. Like the water main relocation on Hill Street, would we consider that a water department expense? I know we were going to, start replacing water mains. Some of these, I mean, when we look at the budget, it looks like this budget increased, but when you subtract some of these things for other departments, it's not as much.
That's true. That's true. I don't think we've 100% determined on that $300,000. You could make a case that it's in the way and it has to be moved, but it also is undersized. So I think we'll probably end up charging it to the project, stormwater project, but we could make a case that it could be a standalone water fund item as well. So this is a quick snapshot of where we all are on all three, or actually 4 phases of the project. Back in February of last year, we were at $68.2 million. We updated the estimate this February. We came down to $65.3 million, and we're currently sitting at $67.4 million. So we're still under where we were a year ago. And I just want to point out these numbers up here for phase 1A, the $4.5 million, and the phase 1 cost of $21.1 million. These are still very conservative. These are the bid numbers. They don't reflect any of the savings that we're anticipating. So we're hoping that this number comes down. I'd also like to say that we're still only at 65% design. So the $15.3 million could go up. More likely it could come down as well. So this number is going to move again.
Hey, Bridget, Peter Barrow here. If phase 1 gets finished on the early side, will we be paying a success fee?
Early completion bonus?
Right, that's it. Yep.
That has not been determined yet, Trustee Barrow.
Okay.
Bridget, for phase 1, the budget of 21.1 or whatever, does that include the optimization sewers that we ended up deferring to next year?
Yes, includes everything.
Okay.
Construction, engineering, optimized sewers, everything in the IGA, the Miller easement. So these are all inclusive costs right here.
And do we have, I can't remember, but we have a contract set for the phase 1 optimization, so we don't expect an increase in that number.
That's correct.
Okay.
Working backwards on schedule, as I mentioned, we'd like to start Phase 2 at Hibbard Park, just the vault work, very early in the year, January, February, March. Winter is a great time to build this vault. People are indoors, windows are shut, and we can get it done quickly. And the benefit of that also is the Park District will have 2 full growing seasons with the newly planted or newly laid seed. So in order to maintain this schedule, the next hurdle for the consulting team is to bring the plans up to 90% design, which they're working on currently. And then we have requested another date in front of the park board to be able to share the 90% plans with them, as well as another public open house, which I'll talk about real quickly in the next couple slides. The village board decision date is September, mid-September, so it would really be the first meeting in September that we would like the village board's decision on whether or not they want to proceed with Phase 2 next year. The contract with Storm Trap, actually, I forgot who asked that question. I apologize. I think Trustee Sullivan, I think I was off a month, so it looks like we're showing October for that contract with Storm Trap. My apologies.
So Bridget, I'm sorry, this is Kathy again. Just one more question on this Phase 2 schedule. So do we have any concern around just, when does the park board, I guess, need to make their final decision? I'm not sure. They don't make a decision on whether or not we move forward. Their decision is going to be approval of the plans. Yes, that's, I guess, what I meant, yes. And so when do we need them to approve the plans? So this falls under lessons learned in Phase 1 and things we're doing much better on Phase 2, and that is Gaywald Hamilton, their engineer, has been involved since day one and has been reviewing these plans. So from the staff's perspective, they've been reviewing every single phase that the village gets, the park district gets those plans as well. And that's why we're also pushing to go in front of the park board so that the board members also have a chance to review those plans. To answer your question, the 90% plans would go to them in September. I would say we would need approval of those plans by the end of October. So if we're not successful in negotiating a contract with Berger and we had to go out to bid, those final plans that went out to bid in this end of October, November stage is when we really want to make sure the park board was comfortable with that, with those plans. So we have a little bit of time there. They have
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Our public engagement for Phase 2 started back last year in April with Park District public hearings as well as a public input session out in the park. And then fast forward to June 6th of this year, Darren and I gave a presentation to the park board that was well received. July 8th, just last month, this month, we had a public open house and neighborhood meetings with Thielen Court and Valley View. And we plan to continue those in August with additional stakeholder meetings, as well as another public open house in September. And then we'll finish up with a pre-construction open house in January. So again, our key next steps, we need to hit the final design hard and make sure we're in a position with all the key decisions coming up in the next couple months, continued engagement with the Park District staff and board, more resident stakeholder meetings, and as Mr. Brayman mentioned, we would like to start negotiating a contract with Berger to see if they will be amenable to some holding their pricing for Phase 1, and that was vetted by a Municipal Services Committee. So there's no guarantee that we'll negotiate a price that we're comfortable with, but we're at least gonna try and work our way through the process. And then finally, begin negotiations with Storm Trap for the vault purchase. Any questions?
Yes, Bridget. This is Trustee Kurzman. In your slide about Hibbard Park vault highlights, I found it especially interesting that we can see the vault will take on water after 1.5 inches over a 3-hour period. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of characterize what kind of storm event that would be. And I guess a follow-up question would be, and how would that compare to the two other vaults as, yeah.
Sure.
If you would know that.
I've asked Darren Olson to join me. Darren, are you available to take that question?
Absolutely. Let me turn my camera on real quick. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Good evening.
Good to see you.
So that first event is that Hibbert begins to take on water, which is that 1.5 inches of rain over a 3-hour period. It's equivalent to about a half year to a 1 year return interval storm event. So it would be an event that, on average, we'd probably see once or twice a year. That's a little bit different, as Bridget had said, that's a little bit different than the one at Community. That will take water a little bit more frequently because it does not have a weir structure. So as that storm sewer system begins to fill up on Wilmette Avenue, the Community storage reservoir will take on water a little bit sooner than Hibbert is going to.
And it doesn't have the weir system because it's on that's a gravity-based system and not a pump-over system.
Absolutely, and that brings up a great point, is that we try to keep water out of both vaults, but especially we try to keep it out of the Hibbert vault until it's absolutely needed so that we can avoid continually pumping water from everyday rainfall events that we might get. We want to save that storage for these larger storm events.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful and enlightening.
Great.
Any other questions?
So, Bridget, just from the timing then, so October is when we have to place the order for storm trap, which is going to be, roughly the 1.5 million, and the bulk of the other expense is really in the in the storm or the pit. When do we do the vault? Sorry, I'm getting too many new terms. When will we do the bond for this? What's our timing on the bond issuance?
I can jump in on that one. So Melinda, Eric, Lynn, and I have been discussing this a little bit, and we were talking about whether to issue it this fall when we do a refunding, since we're already going to the market. And we had come to the conclusion that we really want to demonstrate to Moody's that we can pay our debt service on Phase 1A and Phase 1 with the stormwater utility fee before we go out and do another issuance, making sure that we can retain our AAA. So we're going to be looking at doing an issuance probably in spring of 21. We'll still have leftover proceeds from Phase 1 because we're not spending it all as fast as we initially anticipated, and a lot of those park district improvements aren't happening this year. So we'll have sufficient cash to get this project started in January, and then we'll tighten that up as we move further down our budget process for 21.
And we're still planning to do, what's the timing on the refunding issuance?
I think we were looking at September.
Right, and we had to wait until the bonds were currently refundable.
Correct.
Refunding is the municipal bond market's fancy word for refinancing, which is we're taking advantage of lower rates to call out some of our higher interest rate bonds and replace them with lower interest rate bonds, which saves us money, which is good.
So we'll be coming to the board with an updated cash on hand that's available from the most recent bond issuance when we come in September for the discussion, and that'll have some additional information and data points for the board.
Any other questions?
All right, back to Trustee Sullivan. I think that was it for your. Thank you, Ms. Berger. Thank you, Mr. Olson, for hanging in there with us tonight.
No, I think before I turn over, I'd echo what Mr. Brigham said. It's a very well-run project, and compliments to Bridget and the team for seeing how much activity is going on and managing it. And I think very few, if any, or maybe one complaint, and that's commendable because I've talked about the it may have had an advantage with shelter in place and working from home, given we could get access to the site earlier, but now that's more people there, so you had to manage a lot more people in the neighborhood, so good job. So with that, municipal services is done.
Well, and I'll just say, we've also learned, and we've actually engaged the exact same person to manage community involvement on the Central Street, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So hopefully things will go smoothly there too, coordinating with the businesses in the community. So, all right, thank you, Trustee Sullivan. I'll move on to the Public Safety Committee, Trustee Kurzman.
No report.
On to Judiciary, Trustee Plunkett.
Yes, we have on the agenda the adoption of Resolution 2020-R20, providing for and requiring the submission of an advisory question of public policy concerning the allowance of recreational cannabis sales to appear on the ballot of the electors of the Village of Wilmette, Cook County, Illinois, at the November 3rd, 2020 general election. And I believe I'll turn this over to Mr. Stein.
Well, first, would you move approval of that?
Okay. So I move approval of adoption of Resolution 2020-R20.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Was that Trustee Sullivan, I think?
Yeah.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Let me just interject here for a second. So this is at least our fourth conversation on this. We have had, we enacted the moratorium and we had some conversations when we did that. And the last two meetings we've had some discussion. So the process tonight, first I'm going to ask the trustees if they have any further questions for Mr. Stein. Then I know we did receive some public comment in advance, and I'm going to ask Mr. Artiega to read that and also see if there's any additional public comment. And then I will go back to the trustees to see if we have any further discussion, and then we will call the roll on the motion. So first off, I will start with Mr. Stein and just, and you have a presentation as well, Mr. Stein, so I need to do that first. But then we'll see if there's any questions from the board as you go through this. Sorry, I forgot about the presentation there for a minute.
Well, yeah, the presentation will be done actually by Mr. Hallgren.
Okay.
So, Eric, why don't you pull that up? So, based on the discussion at our last board meeting, we just wanted to come back to the board with a communication plan and let the board and the community know the process we'll be going through to educate the public on the referendum. So Eric will walk through just a handful of slides pretty quickly. This is all still in draft form, so we'll continue to refine this as we move forward and really push this much more so as we get into late September and October. Eric, you want to go ahead and share your screen?
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So running through this, just based upon feedback that we received during the last meeting, wanted to go ahead and provide a draft communication plan in regards to the referendum. So the first part of it is the village board directed staff to place the resolution for the referendum, which we're discussing. We'll put out the proposed language. If approved, shall the retail sale of adult use recreational cannabis be permitted within the village of Wilmette at a business license by the state of Illinois. So once this is adopted, we'll begin our public communication campaign regarding the referendum. What this is going to do, that communication information is going to include state regulations and guidelines, past village board discussions, timeline regarding cannabis legalization, a set of FAQs and additional resources, and then also looking at status of retail cannabis in surrounding communities and looking at Wilmette specific site locations. The other thing that's important to note regarding this is pursuant to the election code, we cannot use any public funds to urge electors to vote for or against the proposition. So therefore, everything that we will provide is going to be related, will be educational in regards to the to the language of the referendum, as well as how voting will be impacted.
And it's worth noting, and it was in Mr. Stein's memo, that there's also restrictions on all of us, both the staff and village board members, in terms of when and where we can say certain things about a referendum. The most important thing to remember is we are definitely considered on the job in our role as a public official if we are in a meeting like now, or if we were on Village Hall property. So just as an FYI, and Mr. Stein can answer questions for anybody, any of the board members who have questions about what they are permitted to say and where they are prohibited from saying certain things.
In regards to some of more detailed information regarding the communications, when we're looking at the state regulations and guidelines, the state has a variety of resources regarding the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. Additionally, we will provide updated information regarding the financial impact of the adult use recreational cannabis. This will include information about both the use tax information and if we receive sales tax information from communities that have allowed for the sale of recreational cannabis. We will provide past village board meeting materials, so we have gone through and polled the meetings that President Belinsky had previously mentioned. All those board packets will be linked with the information regarding cannabis regulations. Additionally, we'll run through a timeline, so showing both how cannabis sales, both medicinal and recreational, have been implemented in the state and the review at the local level over the last several years. And then the FAQ listing will include additional information about the referendum process and additional resources from the state and county regarding cannabis. The referendum communication will also include information regarding surrounding communities. So we will include this map of surrounding communities and their local regulations. So looking at the communities that currently prohibit, allow, and will be voting on, have a referendum in place for November regarding cannabis sales. We've also included, you can see them briefly here, there's small little yellow stars that show where there are current and planned dispensary locations. So one in Skokie, Evanston, Niles, and Buffalo Grove, and then one in Northbrook.
Eric, can I interject for 1 second here?
Yes.
So this is Santa. You recognize my voice. So this is a very helpful map. And I'm not trying to make this more complicated, but I mean, we have the currently voting, gray boxes. I think it would also be interesting, and this is definitely within our packets of information, but there's so much of it, as to what other municipalities have already had a referendum and, how those referendums went, either for or against. I think, residents should know that, these are not the only referendums that have taken place, and it's just kind of interesting to see, how those other referendums, the ultimate votes of those.
Okay, yes, that's helpful. We can certainly add that information into the website information and other communications that go out. Additionally, this section will include financial and community impacts reported by other municipalities. So in past packets, there has been materials about whether there's been any impact to the community. We will include that information in this section as well. We'll also talk about the current locations in Wilmette where medicinal cannabis cultivation dispensaries are currently permitted. This does not necessarily reflect where recreational sales would be allowed if the referendum is approved and then voted positive and then approved by the board in the future, but it's just to give an indication of the two locations where cultivation and sales are currently allowed in the prohibited areas.
Yeah, it seems to me that this should be a little broader in terms of maybe some of the zoning districts shown where, we think there's a chance, and this might be better as more of a zoning map, because I think it could lead the wrong conclusion that, this is only going to happen on Green Bay Road, and that's not the case. So something, just a thought.
I agree with President Belinsky. I feel like we should be careful including this information.
Yeah, ditto on that one.
Double ditto.
I feel the same.
Yeah.
If I can jump, in here real quick.
Yeah, that's the fastest consensus I think we've got in a long time there. That's quick.
So I think we won't include the medicinal locations. Including a zoning map, I'm not sure is particularly helpful either. We maybe just skip this discussion because that's a whole nother discussion the board has to have through a public process that's going to be fairly intensive. So I'm not sure we're really in a position to speculate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the reality is pretty much at this point in time until a future board, if this is permitted, pretty much it'll be any retail location is in play, and then the board can further limit that.
Correct.
All right, then we can strike this component from the referendum communication.
Yes.
Moving on to the communication methods. So we will use our standard communication methods, including the website, e-news, social media, as well as the communicator. So on the website, we'll include it on our main scrolling banner on the main page, and we'll continually update this as new information is received. E-news, we may not do every week communications, but we will certainly shoot for every other week communications. And as we have the run-up to the election, we will start to go a little bit heavier on every week communications. Social media, we'll use Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor to recap messaging from e-news. And then the communicator, our fall-winter communicator is expected to be sent at the end of September, and we're going to dedicate the full page 3 content to referendum information. And then off to the side here is just a draft website that we have for the cannabis referendum, and it'll include all of the links and the information that we have discussed, excluding potential locations. And then looking at the communication timeline, this is just a rough draft for our timeline. So based upon tonight's outcome, we will include information in this week's e-news about the final board action, talk about, set up the referendum question. In the following week, we'll provide notification through e-news and social media that the website has been updated with these referendum sources. And then through the next several weeks, we'll work with Metro Strategies on a weekly discussion on referendum as part of just our standard weekly communications. And then as we get closer and we get into October, we'll provide information about voter registration and the referendum. And then in the last 2 weeks, just continuing to remind residents to get out and vote, and that the referendum question will be out there for them. So with that, any questions that you have regarding the communication timeline or additional content, I'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah, and this is not the only opportunity for board members to discuss with staff, of course, as this is still, rolling. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hallgren. So, as I said, I will ask now the trustees if they have any further questions of Mr. Stein regarding the adoption of this resolution. Okay, so let's move on to public comment then. Mr. Artiega, are you still with us here tonight? Nope,
yes, still here.
Letters, there he is. My understanding is we have a number of them that were submitted in advance, but I would also now let people know if you are watching on YouTube Live, please feel free to submit via the chat window, which is to the right of the YouTube Live video window. Mr. Artiega will go through these. We'll see if there's anybody who'd like to speak live, and then we will go back and see if there's anything on YouTube chat. So, Mr. Artiega, the floor is yours.
Sounds great. Okay, the first email I received from Kevin Lawler. Proposed cannabis referendum opposition. I oppose this. There is no sensible reason we should do this in the village of Wilmette. The tax collected is not worth the inevitable headaches from this type of business, nor the negative consequences a retail dispensary will undoubtedly cause in our village. Also, I do not want a retail cannabis store to negatively impact housing prices, which are already experiencing pressure during these challenging times caused by the pandemic. Please listen to the advice and counsel of our law enforcement professionals. Evidence supports mounting social concerns of many townships and villages throughout the U.S. that have established cannabis dispensaries in their local communities. The negative issues of locating a cannabis retail outlet near high schools or anywhere near nursery or grade schools are real and troubling, all of which we have in close proximity to our family-centric community of Wilmette. I support medical use only, not recreational retail use or lounges. Having cannabis dispensed freely in our community will not have any positive benefit whatsoever. If at all, recreational cannabis dispensaries should be located only near industrial parks or large commercial enterprises / business areas, which are more likely to be trafficked by adults. This is not an appropriate enterprise whatsoever for a residential, family-oriented community like Wilmette. Please do not vote in favor of this referendum. Thank you, Kevin Lawler, Wilmette resident. Okay. This is from Mary Rose. The subject line is selling weed in Wilmette. Of course, we should be selling weed in Wilmette. Currently, we have to spend our tax dollars in Evanston and Highland Park. Would rather spend them here in my town. Moving on to the next one. This is from Mike Pachenio. Subject line, recreational cannabis referendum. I strongly favor allowing the sale of adult use recreational cannabis in Wilmette. I therefore definitely support including that referendum on the November ballot. The village has lost a significant portion of its sales tax base in recent years, and the current economic climate suggests that the tax base will continue to erode. The sale of recreational cannabis will increase the use of retail space and will increase Wilmette's sales tax. Michael Pachenio, 306 Park Avenue. This is from Denise Leith. According to the American Lung Association, WebMD, and the CDC, lung damage can occur from tar from smoking marijuana. Also, the following can occur: addiction, depression, adverse effects from combining with certain medications and alcohol, and a gateway to harder drugs. We don't need to give our young people more occasions to ruin their physical health and mental health. I urge you not to put this to referendum. Denise Leith. Okay. This is from Peter. The subject line is recreational marijuana advisory referendum. If Winnetka, Kenilworth, Northfield, and Glencoe have previously voted to prohibit the operation of marijuana dispensaries, why is Wilmette still thinking about it? So why is Wilmette still thinking about it? They are Tier 1 North Shore suburbs, and if we think we are their peers, then act like one. Stop and don't waste any more time on this matter. Okay. And the last email I received is from Marcy Christensen. I have owned a home and lived in Wilmette since 1986. I have an Illinois medical cannabis card. I have no issues with it being sold recreationally in Wilmette. It provides access to many of the effective lotions and products now available to all. Marcy Carl Christensen, 1016 Greenwood Avenue. And those are the emails we received at our email address.
Okay. I guess I will ask now if there's anyone who's connected to the meeting via Microsoft Teams or via the telephone who would like to address the board on this matter. If you would please identify yourself, and I will compile a list of people who would like to address us. Again, you have to unmute yourself to do that, so just a reminder. All right, moving on. Mr. Artiega, were there any comments submitted via YouTube chat?
No, we have not received any comments on YouTube.
Okay, so I'll close public comment on this matter and go back to the trustees, as I said I would. Is there any further discussion? We obviously, at our last meeting, had a pretty fulsome discussion around people's points of view to come to the consensus to put this on the agenda, but I'll certainly ask the trustees if they've got anything else to say and yield the floor to them if they do. I've got all 6 of you on the screen, so if everybody just nods their head no, then I will move on.
No.
Right, Justice Sullivan nodded his head yes, but I think he meant no. All right, so if there is no further discussion, Mr. Stein, I believe I can just ask the clerk to call the roll. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right, would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adopt Resolution 2020-R-20 providing for the submission of an advisory question of public policy.
Trustee Sullivan?
Aye.
Trustee Barrow?
Aye.
Trustee Dodd?
No.
Trustee Kurzman?
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy?
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett?
Aye.
President Belinsky?
Aye. So the motion carries. The advisory question will appear on the November 3rd ballot. Trustee Plunkett, I think that's it for you.
All other items were on consent.
Okay. There are, make sure that is on the agenda. There are no reports from our special committees. That's item 6.7. Item 7 is new business. There's no additional new business to discuss. So we'll move on to item 8, which is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? That was Trustee Sullivan. Is there a second?
Second.
I don't. Was that Trustee Plunkett? I think got it in under Trustee Kennedy. So I'll give it to her. I'll ask the clerk to please call the motion. Call the roll on the motion to adjourn.
Trustee Sullivan?
Aye.
Trustee Barrow?
Oh, you're frozen.
Uh-oh. I'll move on. Trustee Dodd?
Yeah, aye.
Trustee Kurzman?
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy?
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett?
Aye.
President Belinsky?
Aye. We go back to Trustee Barrow.
Trustee
It'll
Barrow.
still pass. Okay, there we go.
Aye, aye.
All right, so the motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your work.
Total info, news,